Hey everyone, and welcome to our live stream for Ask a Mentor. This is a new series that we have at All Tech is Human, which is focused on having a really intimate, forward conversation with somebody who is actively working in the responsible tech space. I'm your host for today, for the conversation. My name is David Ryan Polgar. I am the founder and director of All Tech is Human, which is based here where I'm sitting in Manhattan. All Tech is Human is a nonprofit that is focused on building the responsible tech pipeline, making it more diverse, multidisciplinary, and aligned with the public interest. Really, our theory of change is that we can build a better tech future by changing the types of people involved in it. And that's why you watching, participating, we want you involved. So if you want to stay involved, please go to our site at alltechishuman.org. We've got plenty of events coming up. We've got a Responsible Tech Summit coming up on Wednesday, September 15th, an upcoming Responsible Tech Mixer, and a bunch more. But really excited to bring on Savannah Badalich, who is the policy director at Discord, a company that many of you know. Was really responded to bringing on Savannah and thrilled that, Savannah, that you could join us today, because I think your background, like a lot of people we have involved in All Tech is Human, is nonlinear or maybe even non-traditional from the traditional tech background or what we might imagine in the tech industry. So I'm going to start off with you, Savannah, with a question. Just love to hear, tell everybody about your current role at Discord, and more importantly, what's your background? How did you actually get to this space where you're the policy director at Discord?
Thank you so much. So my name is Savannah Badalich. I use she, her pronouns. So I am the policy director at Discord. For folks who don't know Discord, you really should. It is a communication service that allows you to hang out with folks that are your friends and find belonging with like-minded individuals. You can do this through chatting. You could do it through audio rooms, through video, etc. There's a lot of fun servers and communities that you all can join and should join. As a policy director, I hold 3 areas of work. First is platform policy. So think of this as content policies. What are the types of content and behaviors that are or are not allowed on the platform, on our service? And so these are things like policies around harassment, extremism, hate speech, as well as some of our cybercrime policies and the like. So working on developing those policies, updating them, especially based off of user feedback. Second being product policy, which I really love. Product policy is really thinking about how ideally and responsibly should the product behave. So building out policies and doing risk assessments with product managers as they're designing and building out the product, so we can mitigate potential harassment or abuse vectors from the very beginning. So safety by design is a term that's going around right now, health by design as well. So again, trying to safeguard the product before it goes out. And then lastly is public policy, which I don't know needs all that much of a background, since most folks know, but working with governments, regulators, public officials, et cetera, to make sure that we are responding to in-region concerns, thinking about how we're going to protect our users in specific areas, and then responding to regulation, those new expectations of us from government. So those are the 3 areas.
So big areas. I mean,
I know
it's back up and actually say this is one of the hottest, sometimes controversial in terms of it's dealing with speech. Speech is an area that was traditionally in the confines or understanding of the governmental types of bodies, right? So I think that's why it's such discuss. If we've moved the quote unquote public square into private companies, therein lies the rub, right? Because now companies like Discord have a significant amount of power in cultivating or curating or positioning the speech, and then determining what users are allowed and what users might be deplatformed.
Yeah, and being mindful that policies are not necessarily one size fits all, and the nuance when it comes to, for example, you can't necessarily deal with slurs as a one size fits all issue. There are a lot of folks who reclaim that language. How are we nuanced in how we respond to reports or do proactive work? So we're making sure we're mindful of all communities and the different ways in which they're speaking their truth. So that's the big areas of work that I do. Very excited about it. Yeah, I know.
A lot of work.
We'll be hiring. So folks, if you all want to help, but a little bit about me. I'm going to start a little earlier than where my career started. So when I was about 9 years old, I got a computer, and I was a big anime and Harry Potter and other types of fandom fan, and explored the internet to find like-minded folks. At the time, I didn't realize I was queer, but it was a great way through fan fiction and art to explore my identity, especially in a community where that was not accepting. And so I really love the idea of finding communities, to finding belonging, finding your identity online, and having that as a safe space to explore yourself. When I went to college, I ended up doing a lot around gender-based violence prevention work. So working for the White House task force at the time, doing legislative advocacy and building out trainings and campaigns to talk about the danger of gender norms and how it can hurt folks of all genders who experience violence. I found the way that using tech to organize, to find folks to talk about these things was really great. So still kept on working on that. But realized that a campus is a pretty privileged space. The US is a very privileged space in terms of what we currently have at our disposal. And so wanted to do more around human rights work. So when I left college, I started working at a human rights company called Breakthrough, which the mission of the organization is to make gender-based violence culturally unacceptable. And so doing that through a variety of ways, which includes they created a storytelling platform to talk about gender and talk about the issues with gender norms and how it can dehumanize some folks and lead to violence or silence certain violences. And then did a lot of advocacy work for folks who were experiencing a lot of the tactics we now see used in disinformation campaigns or state-run cyber warfare against specifically young women and girls online in different regions. So I was very curious about the way that tech then could be weaponized. And as being an outspoken person on the internet, I experienced consequences. And so I've had harassment and doxing happen before, but luckily I had tools that I could use to address it.
So just a quick question, Savannah, did your own background, you mentioned even the queer community and maybe how that's colored your background, that obviously comes up a lot when you're speaking around the pros and cons of anonymity. I know oftentimes we tend to oversimplify. This is my opinion, but if we oversimplify to the point where we think solely anonymity is related to bad behavior online, whereas in fact a lot of bad behavior comes from people who are very open about their identity, but it's also a somewhat, again, my opinion, privileged standpoint to think that people can be open around their sexuality, whereas anonymity or pseudonymity oftentimes serves as protection around sexuality in other countries throughout the globe, and you're dealing obviously with a very global company.
Yeah, exactly. I found pseudonymity as a real shield for being able to explore myself. And I know on Discord there's a lot of the whole thing runs on pseudonymity. You can create whatever kind of persona that you'd like to, have different names and different servers, and so you can create and explore different parts of your identity and find belonging with those communities online. And I know teens really like this when using Discord, because they get to explore without feeling like they'll be necessarily targeted, because it's not immediately obvious that they're 13 to 17.
Right.
So just as a side. So working for the Human Rights Org, I ended up seeing a lot of how men's rights activists were being or weaponizing tech. And so wanted to study human rights and technology, then started working on doing a research study on men's rights activism, slowly started to see that that was leading to radicalization into white supremacy, and then saw a lot of white women there. And so decided I would do a study on how white women are radicalized to organize white supremacy. And again, very gendered, but still this conversation around ways in which people try to oppress other folks using tactics online for radicalization, where the sense of belonging might not always be for the good. So it was really interesting, and thought, I want to be working more within the tech for the public good. So worked for Civic Hall as their director of education, and also led their Civic Startup Accelerator. So for folks who don't know, Civic Hall is an incubator for tech for the public good organizations, community organizing, etc. I then thought, what, I'd like to actually work for a tech company, because I'm seeing, when I did my study, it was on Twitter, Reddit, and YouTube. It's like, I want to work for one of these companies to try to address the issues that I saw while doing my research. And so very quickly moved over to applying for tech companies. I'll be honest that it was really hard.
And what did you say again, Savannah? What was your particular discipline that you had in your undergraduate degree?
Yeah, undergrad was gender studies and global studies. Okay. And then for my master's was human rights and technology. So interesting stuff, but not technical per se, or really just not technical. So ended up after applying for, really dozens of places, getting nearly to the last round at Twitter. I didn't end up getting the role. I asked the recruiter for some feedback, and they told me to maybe work more with products and tech startups. So I did that for a year and then reapplied and became a product trust partner. So when I talked about product policy earlier, there are folks that go in, work with product managers to assess risks of new product features, and then to mitigate those risks. And I worked on a lot of the recommendation systems for Twitter, in part because that was my focus on how folks might be radicalized, or certain dangerous narratives might be normalized through recommendation algorithms.
And was this before or after a lot of the backlash, if you will, around YouTube and some of their recommendation algorithms? I'm thinking maybe specifically around kind of the Alex Jones type of debate that you play out with a certain video, and then a couple of videos later, it leads you to something that takes you down a quote unquote rabbit hole.
Yes. So that was right at the start. That was all breaking right when I began at Twitter. But it was things that I had already seen. So it was really interesting. Got to work with really great product managers, got to learn from them about the technical aspects. Really, I would say the thing that has given me the most, it's been my biggest asset at Twitter and now at Discord, has been my community organizing and stakeholder engagement work. If you know how to facilitate these conversations, bring folks together, do risk assessment and adjust things, and do that sort of trade-offs, especially when there's a lot of passions in the room, then you'll learn the tech later. It's really hard to teach those skills, those interpersonal and operational skills. So and then was at Twitter for 2 years, freaking loved it. A lot of really interesting work happening around that time around product interventions, and taking other types of remediation other than content removal. And then had the opportunity to go over Discord, and I've been on Discord since 2017. Would play MMOs with friends. If anyone's a fan of Elder Scrolls, hit me up. But that's sort of the long-winded trajectory, but it was never clear what my next step would be with each place I was at.
Well, that's the question I have for you, Savannah, is then did you kind of view yourself as open to all of these different opportunities, or did you specifically seek out a platform like Discord, or was there maybe something specifically around the role that maybe attracted you to your current position?
So I think the main transition I had, the two big transitions that led me into tech, was first having worked for a nonprofit doing organizing work stakeholder engagement, building out recommendations, understanding the implications of tech in that specific problem space of gender-based violence, I think that I wanted to then take, okay, well, I know a lot about gender-based violence. I'd like to maybe work more on the fact that tech is being weaponized. And so the first step I took was to apply for a nonprofit that still worked on tech for the public good. So that was Civic Hall. Mm-hmm. So if you have the opportunity to either maybe make that stuff if you're already a nonprofit or even in government and you're able to work for another agency or another nonprofit that have that technical aspect to it that you're interested in learning about, I highly recommend I'm trying to do something like that. So for example, I really love Color of Change. They do a lot around tech advocacy. Mm-hmm. And you wouldn't normally think, okay, Color of Change, their racial justice work, it wouldn't immediately sound like tech, but once you really see the work that they do, it's a good way of, I think, if folks were interested in taking their subject matter expertise and applying it to something a little bit wider, mm-hmm. There are those opportunities now within nonprofit and civil organizations. The second big leap was Twitter. So Twitter was hard. I was dogged with my applications. Like, trust me, I applied, I think I had my spreadsheet where it was over 50 different places. And I think I wasn't really strategic about it. So I would say if you can tweak your resume to include some of the language that's normally in the job description, and just to know that the skills that they normally have there, they are transferable skills from your nonprofit work. So please don't think just because you don't have a tech background that you can't use those skills to join. Also get to know the platform or whatever company that you're using. So you could basically make comments about how it works and how those specific, let's say if you're applying for teen safety role or child safety role, if you understand how the platform works, you'll understand how those specific problems manifest on that platform and are exacerbated. So child safety concerns on one service looks different than on another service. There are similarities, but features really impact that. Yeah.
Since you mentioned Twitter, I mean, I know recently, this is about a year ago, they did a New York Times interview with Jack Dorsey, who said if he had to do this all over again, I'm paraphrasing, that he would have hired a game theorist. The idea behind that is that social media deals with human behavior. So it might behoove us to get individuals with backgrounds that are intimately involved with understanding human behavior. And that's the part, that I'd love to work into, because I saw a few comments, one from Bonnie Irvin, around social work. So I'll bring up, if you don't mind, I'll bring up that comment and love to hear, because we also received a submitted question earlier. And the question was, again, to paraphrase, that this individual is a social worker, thinks they have a real people-centered perspective, great background to offer the tech industry. And that's a lot of what we're even trying to do at All Things Human, right? You want to build a better tech future, get involved in it, right? Work in it. But then this person might be sending out a lot of resumes. They don't know if their resume is being seen, if it's being reviewed, right? How can they find kind of value in their perspective? And really, like, how did you find the value that you had in your own work? So I'll bring that up too with Bonnie, right? And I have noticed a lot of social workers do reach out, and that's frankly something we try to emphasize here, is that the tech industry is not just for technologists. It's very important issues. We need the saints and the poets and the artists and designers and advocates and attorneys and sociologists, you name it, and social workers. So love to hear your opinion for somebody, social work background or any background. How can they be seen a little more?
Absolutely. A few things to the game theory comment. I would maybe 5 years ago say something like a platform is a microcosm of the bigger society. It's actually the part of the macro now. There is no differentiation between online and offline because they're just so ubiquitous between each other. So I agree. I think that there's been some comments about how by some tech leaders recently talking about content moderation as a police department or policing. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that that's a fair way of talking about all the things that policy folks and tech folks can do. Mm-hmm. And so when I think about this, I think about, okay, well, when you're actually talking about, let's say, violence just in a community, you're not just going to have folks who are punitive. You're going to have folks who are educating K through 12, who are teaching the norms and values of a society. You're going to have mental health workers. You're going to have social workers. You're going to have all these different folks who are helping. And sorry, my dog's coughing.
We like any type of background. Bring your dog on. I don't know.
She refused. She just left. She's like, I'm too good for this. So there's a lot of opportunities for not just at the end of when someone's let's say violated a policy online to just remove them or remove the content. There's many other opportunities to intervene beforehand. And I love thinking about public health frameworks and social work frameworks there, and how we can talk about like a bigger culture, because people are coming from different places and bringing those ideas to a platform. And if we're going to actually make cultural norms and policies and rules, there needs to be acclimation, education, restorative justice, et cetera. So all that being said, was it Bonnie's social work?
Yes.
Comment? Hi, Bonnie. I personally think that the background in social work, in particular, social services, nonprofit, direct service work, is the most needed skill set for tech right now. And I don't just think it's for policy or for trust and safety. I think it could be for product managers and engineers if you wanted to pivot that way or do the technical stuff. But really, a lot of the work is looking at these high-risk pieces of content, someone in a time of need, and making judgments. And what I appreciate about the frameworks of social work, for example, is that you're thinking about the whole picture, the nuanced perspective. It's not just that they use, let's say, a slur, but like, what is the context that that's being used in? Is the intent meant to actually hurt someone, or is it reclaiming or counter speech? There's a lot there that can be used. So I actually, there is a person I greatly admire, who is my thesis advisor, and who is a social worker out of Columbia School of Social Work. His name is Dr. Desmond Patton.
Oh, yes.
Dr. Desmond is
one of our ethical tech summits that we had in New York. It might have been the same one.
He's so cool. He leads. He's a tenured professor as part of the School of Social Work, and he leads Safe Lab, which is basically applying social work concepts to social media listening. So like, how could you see if there is maybe an opportunity for violence in a specific community by listening in to what those users in that specific area are talking about? Like, are there ways to indicate when violence can occur, and can there be a place to intervene? He also does a lot on social media research ethics and like how you should responsibly use this information, and making sure not to, call out folks. So yeah, if you want like that kind of example, Dr. Desmond Patton's a really great example of someone who's used that background to then do a lot of really impactful work that I don't think that those tech researchers would have been able to do alone.
Do you think, and then I'm going to bring in a couple questions. We have some questions that we'll bring in, but do you think that showcases maybe the difficulty that platforms like Discord or Twitter or Snap or you name it, TikTok, faced, because you're obviously now dealing with real complex issues around human behavior, specifically Dr. Patton's work, sometimes dealing with gang behavior and kind of reading these social media signals, if you will. I know that's always a really touchy subject around areas like self-harm, is that, platforms need to be very careful around the predictions that they're making, or assumptions that they're making about behavior, because sometimes you might unfortunately be able to trigger
Right.
behavior that you're trying to actually help. So
Right.
oftentimes when you're trying to read signals, it really heightens some of the sensitivity around that.
Yeah.
So the question I'm going to bring in, we have a few good ones because I see this coming up a lot. So we'll bring in John, who's coming from the Netherlands. I believe he's getting his master's in the Netherlands. So what made you want to move to this large tech company, right, being Discord, instead of staying in the nonprofit organizations like your previous career with Civic Hall? What is one thing in your work now that may make you want to leave to a new sector with these skills?
Nice.
Right. So just curious because that comes up a lot in the work that we do with kind of the All Tech is Human community, is that people oftentimes are trying to decide, well, do I go to a nonprofit? Do I go to a university setting, or do I go to a company setting? So just curious to learn about your own thought process.
Yeah. So when I was doing my research on radicalization to organized white supremacy online, I was looking at Reddit, YouTube, and Twitter, and was looking at the specific way their policies, recommendation algorithms, and other features exacerbate that. And so I saw a lot there where I was like, I mean, I'm sure that they know quite a bit of this, but do they, like, what now with this information can I do other than emailing them my thesis, which is they're not gonna change anything even if I do that. And so I felt like I really wanted to take a different approach to my advocacy. I'd still very much view myself as a organizer and advocate. And so the thought for me was, I wanted to try to go into a company, see what are the constraints generally, the motivations, the limitations, et cetera, and see if I could push something from within. And I do think with the help of other advocates that are also there, we were able to push for a lot of really great initiatives, new policies, new interventions. So I think that there's many different approaches to advocacy. I had been doing it mostly outside these organizations, trying to ask them to change. And this time I wanted to see what was it like to be an advocate within the system, to try to use my knowledge to try to push. So I think that's up to folks. I know a lot of folks really don't want to work within a certain system, and that is totally fine. But this was the approach I took. And then in terms of wanting to leave, so right before I started at Twitter, I was thinking I wanted to either do human rights work at a tech company, so again, being that advocate within, or tech work at a human rights company. Right, human rights work at a tech company, tech work at a human rights company. So either one of those. So personally, I do want to take what I've learned eventually and go back into the, the public sector, whether that is again, a nonprofit advocacy role, et cetera. So I can sort of give that information of how these companies normally work and what we can do. But who knows? I feel like I'm making a really big impact right now. So I'm sort of just, going through and trying to learn as much as I can. But yeah, I think, you know what, it's really up to you where you want to take your skill set. But I'll say that tech needs more of the public sector, more of the advocates and organizers and the like.
Well, that's where we have a couple follow-up questions around. So that's obviously the focus that we do too with our nonprofit, is that we need more people. We need multidisciplinary, diverse backgrounds, because we change the types of people. But then the hurdle oftentimes that we hear about is that within the tech industry, is there still a divide with viewing somebody as the quote unquote, this Stanford terminology, but the fuzzy and the techie. It's also a great book, right? The fuzzy and the techie. Well,
yeah,
why the liberal arts will rule the digital world. But the point there is, did you find that you were at maybe a disadvantage, or maybe looked at or perceived differently because you didn't have that traditional CS degree from Stanford or something like that? That obviously is what we generally know as the narrative around the tech industry.
Yeah, I mean, I experienced it a few times, but on the whole, I came to my partner teams, so really product managers or engineering managers, saying, my subject matter expertise is this. I'm here to assess risk and abuse and harassment vectors for whatever product or model that you're working on. I have that background. Teach me the tech. Let me understand. I had this idea of, if I can ask questions and ask for all the background documentation, I can learn enough to have the conversations. So I think that for some folks who normally are just very focused in only on their products, their metrics, that it took a little longer to build that trust. But again, that's why I felt that the organizing and stakeholder engagement was so important, because once I built a relationship with them where there was trust between us, I got to learn a lot more. So I didn't know a whole lot around auditing models, but I learned from amazing engineering managers and engineers by asking a lot of questions. So I think by the end of it, I ended up knowing quite a bit more than some of their new hires did. So I would say that sure, there might be folks who think that, but I would really focus on building a relationship, remaining curious. And honestly, I mean, there's so many new different systems at every new tech company. Trust me when I say that you're going to have to relearn the systems anyway. Yeah, I think that those are sort of my thoughts there. But as long as you have the confidence and know that you're the subject matter expert and you're able to speak to that confidence and that knowledge, I will say, like, tech folks do really appreciate that kind of perspective.
Well, that's the question, Savannah, that I love to bring up, because I'm seeing a few that I'm going to try to work in before coming together comes to an end. But then we're going to ask where people can stay in touch with your incredible work,
of course,
and continue to learn from you. So, question is, where did you see the biggest pushback from your approach of taking a more humanistic approach to the world of tech? So did you get any pushback, or people saying, wait a minute, you know, it's kind of the classic, did they see you as being an impediment to innovation, slowing things down? Or, you know, was there some issue that you had with that?
Yeah, I'll say generally the biggest pushback, like just structurally, is constraints in the products or the systems or the things that you'll use to fix the issue. So as someone from nonprofit who had very little resources, even if you're in a tech company, you can use that sort of jankiness to get stuff through. So use that. That's a side one. But for other types of pushback, yes, of course, there are folks who they have their products have been working a certain way for a long period of time. They don't know why they need to fix something, or they're coming up with new products and need to ship it really fast because the incentives around metrics. And so what I started to do was, and so normally product managers and other folks would bring in the trust and safety functions late when they've already built stuff. And so traditionally, then yes, trust and safety or other policy folks or product counsel would say, hey, that could go wrong in many different ways. And then the product manager gets really frustrated because they have to rebuild. So for what I was trying to do is say, hey, product manager I have a relationship with, can we please, I will not be a blocker to things you're working on if you include me early. Can I be part of the ideation session, the design sprint? Like, let's talk about this. I will make things smoother for you and actually provide head cover for you if you bring me in earlier. So I think that some of the more technical roles kind of balk at the more policy or trust and safety roles because, again, they don't include them early enough. You can switch that narrative and use that actually as, hey, let's build a relationship and include me early so we can make things move faster for you, actually.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly part of the debate, is that people are always worried, like, not a day goes by where I don't hear the term ethics washing thrown out in some capacity. And I guess the concern would be that, okay, great, we're going to hire somebody from this multidisciplinary, non-linear type of background, but we're going to stick them off into a corner where they're going to have little impact on the product. Whereas if I'm kind of taking what you're saying, you're kind of discussing something that comes up a lot, is that this needs to be woven throughout the DNA of the entire process, in order to prevent the issue of, wait, it's kind of late to fix this. We need to have it kind of early in a system.
Yeah, historically, I would view trust and safety and policy as kind of the janitors to product. The issues that they built into the product itself are the things that, policy and trust and safety have to fix.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing this trend in sort of responsible innovation and product policy to include folks earlier. And it then becomes a policy aligned product build. And so for folks who are interested, the kind of job titles you'd be interested or you'd look for if you wanted to do more of that product counseling work is counseling, not lawyer, but you could be a lawyer if you want to do, is product trust, product policy, and responsible innovation. So those are the big titles that are running around. I'll be hiring for some of those roles in 2022.
And we'll be sure to reach out your way to have that listed on our Responsible Tech job board that we're trying to kind of curate the positions focused on limiting the harms of tech, ensuring that the tech is aligned with public interest, and diversifying the tech pipeline. But I'm going to bring up a question right now. So this is something I think the audience is really interested in, right? So you mentioned how difficult it was getting into tech companies, right? Even some of these hurdles with getting your resume kind of along the process and then getting hired. Can you share some lessons you learned now that you've now understood from your success or from now your current position at Discord? What have you learned? I'm sure you had some hurdles. I'm sure you had some drawbacks. I'm sure you had some rejection.
Yeah.
What have you learned from that?
Yes. I mean, I blanket messaged, sent out my generic resume at the very beginning of doing this. So I would highly recommend not doing that. I would, if you're seeing certain types of roles that have certain patterns, like one is like a policy writer and developer, if one is like a trust and safety agent, if one is more of that product policy, write your resume in a way that speaks to the skills that are written in the job description. Just like this shouldn't be new, but even nonprofits are using these resume review algorithms that will look for highlighted words and like certain types of, it's keywords to then bring those resumes to the top. And so I really recommend making sure that if you really like a job, even have a summary just above the resume and give a bit of a background about why you fit those specific skill sets. If you really want it even more, then do a cover letter. So again, they're looking at what the specific skill sets that were in that job description. So make sure to use that as a place for keyword picking. I also do think this is just something within tech companies. You will have better luck if you're referred. And I mean, you'll be selected for at least usually a phone call. So if you do know anyone who is in like that organization, you can reach out and talk to them. I don't advise doing this if you have never talked to them before, if you don't have a very good relationship. But one thing I did was say, hey, I really need help breaking into this. I know that we've worked a bit together. I'm wondering if you're willing to put me as a referral, and be honest about it, and know that they can always say no, and that it is them doing a favor. So please be, give them the thanks that they deserve. And beyond that, if you're able to get a hold of a recruiter, then sending them your resume and asking if there's any open jobs that might fit is always nice. But again, you should always reapply if there's a new job listing.
Well, the question I'm going to bring in now, which I think is a good follow-up, Savannah, to a lot of what you're saying. So from Andrew McAdams, as someone who works in tech, I've been struggling with getting any eyes as well for social good roles, such as trust and safety, ethicists. What recommendations do you have for somebody already in tech? And we've received a lot of messages like this where somebody's already within a tech company or maybe a startup, and they're trying to almost pivot, so to speak, right? We get a lot of career changers as well, where they're saying, wait, how do I be seen in a different light? Or how do I highlight some of my focus and specialties and maybe just perspective and understanding?
Right. That's a really great question. especially if you're in a more technical role, I would say first, if you're able to bring that ethical, responsible tech and social good perspective to your team, that's where you'll have the most impact. I think that if you're able to talk to engineers or product managers or whoever you're working with to see if we could add another like ethics test, or hey, should we do an audit? Hey, I saw this, the fact that folks are trying to do retros on the impact of our features. Like if you start building that, you'll have a little bit more of not only a direct impact, but some things that you can then use to pivot. And I think that there's a lot of, it's actually probably easier right now to frame the need for those types of roles, whether it's ML researcher looking at auditing models for bias, or it's a trust and safety role that works with product, or excuse me, any of these. I think that if you're able to talk with your manager or through the planning process that you have internally, add a line or a project where you're focused on doing that sort of assessment and then also advocacy, it will be a lot easier for you to be able to push it through. So like some of the first projects I wanted to work on, I had to advocate it to be actually put on our roadmap. And because I had that isolated item and then I could point back to it all the time, I was able to do more and more interesting projects. So within tech, I think it's also finding the other advocates within your organization. So talk to trusted safety, talk to policy, talk to the ERGs or BRGs, like whatever the employee resource groups or what have you, and see, hey, are you interested in working on this together? Is there anything I can help with? Can I be an advocate anywhere? Those technical roles have a lot of clout.
I always quote Douglas Rushkoff from Team Human, right? Find the others, right? Find the others who are interested in this to kind of build on this. But I just want to bring in two more questions. So we just have one more question we'll bring in, and then just I'm going to reach back out to you to ask one kind of final takeaway. But the question was just looking at specific companies, right? Are there different companies that have been more open to these non-technologist roles? And I think maybe we even need a new term for that, right? Because kind of to your point, it seems like we're kind of moving to this kind of amalgamation of background and talent. So maybe it's not even a clean-cut technologist, non-technologist. Maybe it's, hey, they didn't have a traditional CS degree or something like that. But I'm curious, did you notice anything, or have you noticed anything about some companies are more into this than others?
Yeah, I love the way that the question was asked. So I would say, I feel like there are companies, I think you have to sort of choose what kind of company you want to work at. If you want to work at a company that maybe isn't as freedom of expression, aka anything goes based, you could try to work for sort of, something like a Twitch, a Pinterest. So there you have a lot more power to kind of put forward new policies, and they're likely to be brought up. They're likely to be taken into consideration, because the idea is that they want to make it palatable for as many people as possible, and not sort of allow certain types of folks like white supremacists on the platform, because they want it to be as accessible to as many people as possible. In terms of structurally, I've seen a lot of companies that are just investing heavily right now in these types of roles. I would say Twitter is one of them. There's a really great team, Product Trust, that you all should think about, the trust and safety team as well. I've seen a lot of interest in Roblox and trying to remember, and Reddit. Again, I think that looking at how they talk about safety and how they talk about the trade-offs is a good indicator in whether or not they're going to be a good company. But I would say some of those social media companies are really interesting. But you should also consider maybe the more beyond that, and thinking about maybe even trying to join a tech company's ethics or safety or whatever feature, to try to then go in a different way. So even if you are siloed into that one spot for a little bit, you can break out. And there's a lot of appetite to have that cross-pollination.
That's a lot of what we're hearing lately, is that sometimes even if you can't get maybe a full-time role in this direct space, oftentimes people get that full-time role after kind of evolving their own current role to have more kind of tech ethics or responsible tech, responsible innovation involved in the process. But the final question, Savannah, unfortunately, we'll have to go pretty soon, is that for everyone watching, right, a lot of us want to get more involved, want a position like yourself, right, policy director at Discord. What's their next step? What should they do, right? What's your advice to them? Is it about going out networking or reading more articles or reaching out to people? What would you say? What would be your advice to anyone who wants to get more involved in this space?
If you are feeling uncomfortable that you don't know enough about like the tech building process, I highly recommend looking up articles and trainings on product management just generally, so you can understand how these companies kind of think and work. It's not super technical. It'll give you at least the language to use when you're talking in your resume or in interviews. I would say try to work maybe more within, if you can have as a first step, nonprofits that do tech for the public good. So civic tech, public interest tech, because that is something where you are working in tech and you're able to more easily add it to your resume to get that next step. And then I would try to see if there's any ways that you can network with folks who are already in some of these positions that you're interested in, to see if they'll be willing to refer you. So those are the big things. And I would check out one site that comes to, or two sites that come to mind are Trust and Safety Professional Association, TSPA. They have new curriculum on what trust and safety looks like and different sort of understandings of policy development. Read it. And then the other piece is platformabuse.org, which goes over some, ways in which specific kind of policies or product features can be misused. As long as you start to see some of these cases, you have more that you could speak to. And again, be kind of shameless in the fact that you have that subject matter expertise that can and will benefit product development and the company as a whole.
I like that. Yeah, so it's incredible guidance and perspective that you bring in, Savannah. So I want to thank you for coming on today for Ask a Mentor. And then just finally, where can people stay in touch with some of your incredible work? Where can they stay in touch after?
It's like, call me, beat me if you want to reach me. I think Twitter's probably the best place, though my likes are chaotic and sometimes my retweets are too. And then other than that, LinkedIn, let me know if I can help. Again, I think that I want more folks like you all to be confident that you already have the skills. The things that are lacking in tech right now are the things that you all excel at. And I also really believe heavily in us going into these organizations and training the more technical folks to think about ethics and responsibility. So you have all these tools. You just have to be a little creative on how to get in.
I like it. So well said. So we'll leave it there. So Savannah Badalich, thank you for coming on Ask a Mentor. I'm David Ryan Polgar with All Tech is Human. Stay in touch with us at alltechishuman.org. So have a great day, everyone.
Bye.